Hello and welcome. So since Jagex decided to make another double loot weekend, sure, why not? This will most likely become a bi-yearly regular event, like how double XP weekend is. But anyway, onto what I actually did over double loot weekend. First thing I realized during double loot was that I didn't actually buy any auras yet. For those who don't know, there is actually a 25 to 50% aura discount in the loyalty shop ending on this Tuesday, December the 4th. So I went and bought quite a lot of auras. So when they announced Double Loot Weekend, this was kind of the first video that came to my mind, but to be fair, I actually got the possible future Double Loot Weekend idea from Dardan and Sir Katade, a few good friends of mine. But anyway, since I myself had saved my darts, I went to use my darts at Next. I actually went and did like the whole KC thing, and I got all the key pieces within like 15 KC. So I think it's more common than before because I remember going for like 40 odd minions before actually getting a drop. So I didn't get much. It would have really helped my Nose to Bill series if I actually got something. Which, by the way, for those wondering when the next Nose to Bills episode is, I'm actually incredibly backed up on clips since I had not even covered Double XP Weekend, which happened like over a month ago. So initially, I had planned to do barrels on my Nose to Bills account because pre-EOC I had no plans to next unless there was like some kind of update because I had already gotten one of all the drops besides the gloves and boots. Those were like added afterwards, and I just didn't feel like nexting because Next had long dropped below 10 mil per hour, and it just didn't really interest me anymore because it was the same old stuff. But with the EOC, it made Next much more doable without having to bring a crashing 2 bill printing set that I bought years ago with a loan I got from Bornforpvm. So since you could designate a tanker who takes the majority of the damage in the kill, I was using Void even though it's less defense. It's better offense, especially if you're going for a fast blood phase. So I'm using Void right now because I like to tribrid when I'm at Next. The only reason I bring Mage is because it's kind of required since Next could play range now. And just using Void, it's less item switches because you gotta bring a top and bottom if you're not using Void. Because if you're not wearing matching top and bottom, then it lowers your accuracy. So I only recorded one full kill, and then after that, I just recorded it dying and then showing the drop. I got a fair amount of kills in the team I was with. Now, for those of you who are asking for maybe a next guide made by, whoever makes it. Like, here's the thing. When a new money making method comes out, the people who go and try something unknown and find a very good way to do a skill or kill a boss efficiently, which in this case is kill a boss, they deserve in a way to exploit the method as much as they want. But as with anything in this game, eventually people catch on to what to do, how to do it properly, and then people make guides on that, which I may do eventually, but Darda may do a guide before me. But it really doesn't matter who makes the guide as long as it's informative. So the point is that people who try an update on the first day should be able to try to make money from it. Of course, this kind of depends on the update. Depends if it's big like a next update or small like God Wars items rework, where the only difference was under 50 mil in price. But anyway, back on topic. The main thing about the EOC that I like and kind of dislike is how the bosses are different. So previous guides are out of date, but this also leaves a lot of people who actually don't know how to do certain bosses. Like let's just say Barrows, for example. Barrows they're the same stats as God Wars gear, but they're a whole lot cheaper and a lot easier to get. So which is why Barrows is actually pretty useful. They also increased the cost to repairing barrows, but that's besides the point. And there's like Darax, which in the EOC is very powerful. I'm actually expecting a nerf, but who knows if it's going to happen. Because at a certain HP, and it's not even that low, you can actually hit better than Chaotix. So being back at Next kind of reminds me of when Next first came out, but kind of about a different thing. Like, well, first, when a new item comes into the game, the G value is usually low. This is probably just to prevent a new item from being coin share for more than it's actually worth on the first day. But anyway, in the first year Next was out, most of what I did was free for all split. Besides the fact that the items were actually worth more if you were loot shared or free for all split, there's quite a few things that you could do to increase your chance of dealing the most damage by the end of the kill. At the start, it was learning who next focused on, so it was like who was further away, who had the less defensive stats. Then there was brew counting, where you would brew right before your overload would boost your stats up, keeping all of your stats except for magic as high as possible. Then there's little things like timing when Next does a shadow attack, which only saves you like 2 ticks compared to somebody who doesn't actually time it and just moves when they see it. but that 2 ticks could have been another Ruby Bolt spec. So those were a few examples of things you could take advantage of in pre-EOC Next. Eventually, people caught on to what you're supposed to do, how to end T-Tank, and all that stuff. But before they actually caught on, I was still averaging about 50 to 80% kill rate in the free-for-all teams I was in. Which was good because back then I didn't have to split the basic drops I got. But nowadays, most of the team I go on, we just split every single thing, the basic drop, unique drops. So, I mean, it's still fun to be a little bit competitive on who gets a drop. I don't think there's actually many bosses you can actually be competitive on. Like Corp, it's like basically you have somebody tank and then that's it. Everybody else just focuses on damage. Aside from running away from the core now, since I don't even know if you could stun it. Then there's TDs, and that's just per switching. But even that, that's just duo, and TDs are easy. So with a few new changes to Next and the new abilities that kind of keep on changing, they keep changing the description from the first day, but I guess they're still doing fixes. But I was able to get about 35-ish of the 40 to 50 kills that I actually participated in, which was nice for the first 10 hours I Next. I think I was on somewhere below 20 hours during the 48 hours of double loot weekend. But back onto the competitive side of PVM, you can actually, like for next, there's a bunch of small things and big things that you can actually do to maximize your DPS. There's choice of weapon like Maul, which I use because I prefer the abilities on it, and also there's a cap of like 3,000 damage on next, so you gotta keep that in mind when choosing what weapon. Then there's choice of abilities, which kind of ties back into the choice of weapon. I mean, that's the bulk of it. There's a bunch of smaller things, such as knowing when to use ultimate by looking at her HP, seeing if she's high enough HP, or should you just go for a threshold or just save up. Now, of course, if you're going into Bloodface, of course you want 100% adrenaline, just like you would before EOC. Then there's knowing when to use channeled abilities during Shadow Phase because you don't want to use it when Next uses a Shadow attack and you're standing right on top of it, or having to cancel your channeled ability early. Then there's pretty much the same thing for Ice Phase because you don't want to use a channeled abilities and then have to move away to free your teammates or run away from Contain This, which I think the cycle is usually around 30 seconds. I never actually figured out exactly how long the interval is, but if you've nexed a lot before EOC, you get a feeling when her next shadow attack is. Same with all her other attacks. But all that is really just from experience. And this reason is why Nex is currently my favorite boss, because there's so many little things that you could do to be a bit better, and the difference really shows in small teams, which is where I learned most of what I know about Nex, which also kind of ties into why I dislike using coin share, loot share, or even joining a mass. In coin share slash loot share, where people are guaranteed a portion of the loot, people get lazy, they stop trying to deal damage. And you get people at Corp not using Turmoil, well, the old Corp I mean, and you get people who do not even pot for several kills in a row, sometimes done intentionally, and then you have to use Stat Spy to find who. And seriously, if you're not even going to try, why join somebody else's team? If you do this with friends, sure, it's fine, because it only affects people you know. But you're like, if you join somebody else's team, you're expected to do your own share. But so basically, I dislike how people who join a coin share slash loot share team, they don't have to try as much and they choose not to try. Well, I mean, for most bosses like the four God Wars General, you probably don't need to learn anything more. But for Corp, TDs, and Next, there's actually still quite a bit you could learn from just the basic of how to kill the boss. So most of what I learned about Next was from duos that I did from with Bornforpvm. I had to learn how to keep Next from hitting me during Shadow Phase. I had to learn how to kill Flemus without Next constantly maging me. Although I guess some of this was from the solo Next I did like. I mean, you can still solo it, except this time you're not safe spawning because you could just out damage Blood Phase. And if you do Ice Phase properly, you don't take as much damage. So I think the main way people get around to learning a new boss is, I mean, they can skip a few steps to like, some people may start in a mass, they work their way down to smaller teams like 3 to 6 man teams, and possibly even duo or solo it eventually. For me, I started at a Next mass on the first day. Sadly, when Next came out, I did not actually know anybody who did PVM. All my friends were PKers at the time, so I went on the RS forums to look for masks, and eventually I was able to meet a few people that I connect with consistently, such as my pet snail on the shelf. Fortunately, I met Bornforpvm when Next first came out. I got around to dueling Next with him from the times where he died or I died or one of us had low supplies. One of us was left in the room, so eventually we noticed a few times where Next would just keep jumping back to the west entrance and did that non-stop. Then we were able to mimic the required circumstances, and then I just used that to attempt to solo kill with the safe spot, and was able to do it on the first try. And see, a lot of this is stuff you can learn where you're forced into a situation where you either make the kill or you don't. And it depends on how much do you know about the boss. Are you prepared? Are you going to panic? Did you only learn how to attack, or did you learn little tricks that can stall the boss while your partner banks? And it's little stuff that like this that you can learn in smaller teams. It doesn't really help with larger teams because you just don't get into that situation. Then when it actually happens, you're not prepared. I've been talking about Next for quite a while, so I guess I'll actually go on to what I actually got over Double Loot Weekend. There was a point where we briefly went to CoinShare because I didn't really care about, I wasn't doing Next for money, I just did it for fun. And the first split we got after like 10 hours of Nexing was CoinShare. It was a 6 mil double Virtus boots, which, I mean, it's kind of decent considering that almost, like, a lot of things are dropping in value. And a thing I like about Next is how the basic drops actually add up to quite a bit, like a large amount, especially since brews have gone down a bit, so the cost of supplies have gone down as well. And this clip is all the loot I got in one free-for-all split trip, and that's a lot. Although most of it is in Onyx, and Onyx are only that high because of alch value. Another reason I prefer FFA over CoinShare is even though it's a lower split, the person who does the most damage gets the drop and gets the item shown on their adventures log. So I was able to get double Torva helm. I remember like the first double loot weekend I had, like that they had, I was dueling next with Bornforpvm and we weren't getting anything. So Runeshark, who I didn't know at the time, I didn't even know he had a YouTube channel, he asked if he could join, and since we were like 30 kills dry duel, like, why not? It wouldn't really matter anyway since I didn't think we were getting anything. So then 2 kills later, we get double Torva plate, and immediately I was a bit mad that, I mean, if he wasn't there, probably wouldn't have actually got an item. But for it to go from a duo to a trio and then get an item, that's, I don't know, I'm still a bit superstitious. But even so, even though it went from a duo to a trio, the split was actually still pretty decent, and it's actually, if it was today, it would have been really good because back then it was actually worth a lot more than it is now. And for this clip, it kind of goes back to what I like about Next, how if you know the little tricks to maximize your DPS, you could even get the kill even if the odds are pretty much against you. For this kill, I missed the first 2 phases because I was actually looting my grave, and I still got the kill. So the Torva helm sold for somewhere around 40 mil each, so 80 mil total. So that's decent split. Although it was a fairly large team than usual, but I mean it's just fun to get the drops on your A-log. Then there's like a 14 mil basic loot, so that was pretty decent split. So after splitting the loot, we went to do another trip on Next. I think it was the first or it might have been the second kill. But I actually got Virtus boots, double Virtus boots. It's not worth that much. I mean, with how many people are there, it was only a couple mil split. But I guess it's okay. Then later, towards the end of the trip, we got another. I was still averaging 80% of the kill, so that's pretty good. And I was able to pick myself up a double Virtus wand, which I think it's one of the more valuable items. Like, it's probably worth more than Pernix Body since Pernix Body is dropping, since you don't need Pernix for Next anymore. And I mean, it's expensive armor. You don't really need it for anything unless you're going for defense. So the Virtus one doesn't actually show up in the global message, so the people on my team didn't actually know I got it until I showed them, which is, I kind of like that because you can kind of give that surprise, but with any other item, it's like you see it in the feed before they actually tell you. So after getting dropped, we went to the GE, and I sold the Virtus wands for 114 mil each, and added in a bit more for the basic loot that I got, and gave each person about 49 mil. It was a 5-man team, so I guess that's pretty decent for one trip. Although averaging the cash per hour throughout the hours that I've played during Double Loot Weekend, I think I averaged somewhere below 7 mil per hour. And this pretty much was the first day I did for Next. On the second day, I wasn't on as much. For the last few hours, I did some duos with a good friend of mine. Well, we didn't get anything. It would have been nice if we got something at the last minute, but we didn't. So that pretty much sums up what I did over Double Loot weekend. I think I made somewhere close to 100 mil, probably under. The Virtus one was really good. The Torva helm was, I mean, it's okay. It was like 40 mil each. And then, 40 mil each helmet. And then the Virtus boots, that's not as much. So that's all for this video. Thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.